Why didn't anyone ever tell me that canola oil stinks? I don't mean that figuratively, like it's bad for your health or something like that. Don't worry, that one I hear in hundreds of comments. I mean that it literally stinks. It smells fishy. I've used it all my life to sear all sorts of things. Fish, steak, chicken. I've used it in dressings and I've put it into chiffon cakes. But it wasn't until I made mayo with it that I realized that it smells. Our main story tonight, as John Oliver would say, is about homemade mayo. Of course, it's not just going to be a recipe. There's plenty of that goodness on the internet already. This video will answer many interesting mayo questions through testing. But mayo is mostly oil, and we can't really start telling its story before we straighten out this oil conundrum. The first time I made mayo was a few weeks ago. It worked like a charm, but it smelled fishy, and I had no idea why. I smelled the eggs, nope. I smelled the lemon juice, nope. They smelled as expected. Then I smelled the oil, and bingo, it's fishy. I thought that it went rancid and opened a brand new bottle of canola. Still fishy. It's not something you'd notice if you were searing a steak. The aroma of the steak would take over. But if you stick your nose into a bottle of canola, it's unmistakable. The problem is that it doesn't seem to smell the same way to everyone. I gave this bottle to 5 different people to smell. Some got the fishiness and some didn't. Some said it was vegetal. But most people felt there was some sort of smell. So I googled for this issue, and guess what I've learned? I'm not the only person who finds the smell of canola revolting. When Seriouses.com did a taste test of store-bought mayo, some tasters found the brands made with canola oil unpleasantly fishy. So thank goodness that most commercial mayo is made with soybean oil, not canola. I wanted to try soybean oil by itself, but couldn't find it in my store. So I bought some vegetable oil and refined sunflower oil. Both had absolutely no smell to me, so this fishiness is not something that's common to all refined oils. But I strongly suggest that before you make homemade mayo, you smell your oil. Making your own mayo is indeed very easy if you own an immersion blender, but I wanted to try a few variations to see which one I like the most. I don't mean flavors. You can flavor your mayo any which way you want after you make the base. Here's what I wanted to know. What's the difference between using a whole egg versus only a yolk? Are some immersion blenders better than others for making emulsions? Should you add sugar to mayo? When should you add garlic? And is extra virgin olive oil really such a terrible idea? Okay, so let's start with the internet's favorite mayo, and then we'll vary it to answer my questions. The concept is completely dependent on your equipment. You need an immersion blender and a tall container that fits it perfectly, like this 2-cup Pyrex measuring cup. In goes 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. I also add 1 teaspoon of Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. I like to add it to the water-based ingredients since salt dissolves really well in water but not in oil. Now I need to add a cup of oil. There is no need to dirty another measuring cup for oil. The egg mixture is roughly 1/4 of a cup, so I just pour the oil until it reaches 1 1/4 cups. We need to let this mixture sit for about 30 seconds so that all the oil rises to the top. In goes the immersion blender until it hits the bottom. Don't turn it on until then. Start the immersion blender, but don't lift it up. We are waiting for the ingredients on the bottom to become more viscous and white. That's the sign that the emulsion is starting to happen. At this point, very slowly, pull the immersion blender up and keep going up and down until all the oil turns thick and creamy. And look at this! We've got mayo! So I did this basic procedure several times with slight variations, and here's how they worked out. Every time I see a video of someone making a mayo or Hollandaise with an immersion blender. They're using a blender with holes on the sides. Mine doesn't have these holes. It looks like this. It's my trusty Braun blender that is about 18 years old. For comparison, I bought a Hamilton Beach blender with holes on the sides. Seriously.com rated it as the best affordable blender. Hamilton Beach took slightly less time to get everything emulsified, but both blenders worked perfectly well. Before you run out and buy Hamilton Beach, let me just warn you that I have all sorts of issues with the design of this blender when it comes to other tasks. I'll save that for another video, but for mayo it is indeed very good. I heard that removing the white doesn't make a big difference and is not worth it. But let's try it and see. Of course, it's impossible to remove the white and not replace it with anything else. This wouldn't give me enough stuff for the immersion blender method to work. So I replaced the white with 2 tablespoons of water and kept all the other ingredients the same. This water and yolk mayo was a lot softer and creamier than the version made with the whole egg. Here is the mayo with the yolk and water. And here is the mayo with the whole egg. This was especially helpful after refrigeration. A day in the fridge made the whole egg mayo incredibly stiff and somewhat unpleasant. Of course, it's possible that you don't have to remove the white, you just need to add a few additional tablespoons of water. But my fridge is nothing but mayo at this point, so that's the theory you'll have to test out for yourself. The recipe I'll give you below the video is for a mayo made with a yolk only, since that was the one that worked the best for me. Sugar is a very controversial ingredient in mayo. That's one of the many reasons many viewers gave me for making their own. I agree that many commercial mayo brands get carried away with sugar and I find them unpleasantly sweet. That's one of the reasons I like Hellmann's in a jar. It's the most toned down in the sugar department that I found. But a tiny bit of sugar is actually quite nice. I tried making mayo with no sugar at all and with a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, and I like the 1/4 teaspoon of sugar version better, so to me that's a keeper. Avoiding extra virgin olive oil in mayo is common wisdom, but I wanted to test it for myself. The argument against EVOO in mayo is that the vigorous mechanical action of the blender exposes some of the bitter compounds. Those compounds are naturally there, but are locked in the oil particles and not accessible to our taste buds until the blender shakes them up. But I put olive oil into food processors and blenders for other applications like pesto and salmorejo, and it seems fine to me. Of course, I'm not very sensitive to bitterness, so who knows? Well, anyway, I made mayo with extra virgin olive oil, and it was indeed disgusting. So kids, don't try this at home. I know that garlic is a classic addition to mayo. In principle, I'm all for it, but I don't like to add it to the base mayo while making it. For that clean, sharp, beautiful garlic flavor, you want to add it shortly before serving. The smallest amount of mayo that you can make is slightly more than 1 cup, and I rarely can use that in one meal. So I prefer to make the base without garlic and then add the garlic just to the part that I am planning to serve that day. Of course, if you're making mayo with raw eggs, you probably shouldn't store it all that long anyway. So has all this mayo making finally convinced me to make my own mayo? No, don't get me wrong, it's extremely easy, but you have to make more than a cup of it and use it relatively quickly. Yes, I am aware of pasteurizing my eggs, using sous vide. Also, America's Test Kitchen has a method of cooking the eggs and lemon juice in a microwave before making mayo, but that method requires dirtying a food processor and a fine mesh strainer, which is a pain to wash. And the question is, why? If tasted completely by itself. I did find homemade mayo superior to Hellmann's, but not superior enough to eat by itself. I would need to flavor it with something anyway. Once the flavorings were added, homemade mayo was slightly different than Hellmann's, but not better than Hellmann's, at least to me personally. Of course, it could be years of taste memory talking. Maybe I like Hellmann's the way some Americans like Twinkies or McDonald's. They grew up with it, so it tastes right to them. But I know many professional chefs who are perfectly happy to use Hellmann's. Just to clarify, that I'm talking about Hellmann's in a jar, not that abomination in a squeeze bottle. You might have seen my previous video about it, but if not, the link is below, and that's also the video that contains many of my favorite mayo flavors and their recipes. Of course, all of them work with homemade mayo, so as Adam Ragusia says, you do you! Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.